Hi there, faithful politics listeners and viewers. If you're watching us on YouTube, thanks for joining us again for another episode of Faithful Politics. I'm Josh Bertram. I am your faithful host, and I have, as always, our political host, Will. It's good to see you, Will.
Hey, Josh. Well, you have really good taste in co-host. So, yeah, thanks.
Indeed, I appreciate that. I would agree, and you as well. So thank you for your great taste in co-host, and we're excited for you guys to be here. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this with friends. We try to get really good content out there, thought-provoking, deep conversation starters. So we want you guys to be blessed by this and to use it. So make sure that you share it and also leave comments. We try to read them all. We can't respond to them all, but we try to read them all, and we appreciate getting your feedback. And today we have a very special guest, Regina Cates. Regina V. Cates, she is an author, activist, and podcaster dedicated to guiding individuals towards leading heart-centered lives. She co-founded Romancing Your Soul, an organization that inspires people to live with love, compassion, and purpose. She also hosts the Lead with Your Heart podcast, offering practical advice on improving relationships and communication and personal boundaries. She earned a bachelor's degree in teaching from Sam Houston State University and a master's in public and private management from Birmingham Southern College. And through her work, she has encouraged and continues to encourage individuals to take responsibility for their actions, words, and thoughts, fostering beneficial change in their lives. And she's written several books, and today we're excited to talk to her about her latest book, The Real Conversation Jesus Wants Us to Have, which is scheduled for publication in March of 2025. Regina, thank you so much for coming on the show and being with us today.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Will. Pleasure to be here with you.
Absolutely, and the pleasure is all ours. And so I gave a little bit of an introduction there, but I'd love for you to kind of fill in some of the gaps that you would like to kind of tell us a little bit of your story, Reader's Digest version, and then get us to why you're writing books about real conversations that Jesus might want us to have.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I am an author. I'm an advisor. I'm an activist. I have done podcasts in the past. I'm no longer doing those actively, but those episodes are out there for the world to hear forever, which is great. Thank you for mentioning them. I wrote this book specifically, Josh, because growing up in the church, fundamentalist Christian church in the southern part of the United States in the 1960s, South Texas, I sat in the pew every Sunday and listened to how horrible I was because I'm gay. I was about 4.5 years old when I knew this. I cannot explain to you. You could give me $3 billion, I would take it, but I still couldn't tell you how I knew at that young age that I was just different. But every week I was subjected about 4 or 5 times to listening to how horrible I was, and yet I had to make sense of Jesus loves me, loves all the little children in the world. So after about 60 years of life, I decided to go ahead and put this on paper, and I've done that for everybody who has ever had a question about how they fit into organized religion and how that aligns itself with the heart of Jesus. Because I have found in my experience, Josh, just to be honest, they don't always align the way that they need to.
I really love that, and thank you for telling us. We
Yes.
spoke with another pastor, Brandon Robertson. He's a gay pastor up in New York, and he was also talking about how he kind of wrestled with these two things. He grew up in like a conservative and like environment, but then turned out very different, and just was having to kind of like wrestle with like who he was as a person and what he knew as Jesus. Can you talk a little bit more kind of just about like how you came to the realization that despite what you're hearing from man, that you knew Jesus really did love you?
It took a while, Will. Thank you. It wasn't like an overnight, oh, okay, I'm 5 years old now and Jesus loves me and it's going to be great. It took, as I describe in a book, a short stay in a psychiatric hospital because my parents committed me there because I was gay. And it took many, many years of learning to accept myself. And also it took defining who God is for me. And that took a moment for me to do that because I was taught that God is male, of course. Sorry, guys, but it's true. So that's why we have misogyny to this day. We can talk about that at length if you'd like to. but I'd be happy to. But I had all of these questions, and it was hearing that Jesus loves all the little children in the world, but not me. And that really got me on the path of thinking, well, why not? I was born this way. Why not? And then the 7 clobber verses came, and there was a justification for each one of those, but never were they put into context. Never were they put into the context of the society which created those verses. A society where women had zero power. Women were sometimes less than cattle. So certainly it was very difficult to even make sense of that as a small child. And I guess I'm just weird that way. I've asked questions all of my life. I was not a popular Sunday school person. I really wasn't. It was like always, well, wait a minute, why?
I love that. Yeah, I don't know how popular of a Sunday school person I was either. I probably wasn't necessarily asking the same questions, but you do always kind of wonder, like, hey, why is this happening? And then when someone just says, well, because the Bible says so, or because I say so, it just doesn't quite work. And so I totally get that. And I really appreciate your authenticity when it comes to that. I can tell, and I know that your journey obviously has shaped so many of the themes in your writing and your work and your book. How did, maybe give us even some more specifics on how your faith journey shaped the themes that you're exploring in the book?
I think my entire life has been a journey of questioning so many things within our society. As a woman, I don't have autonomy over my body. Why is that? As a woman, I don't make as much money. Why is that? As a woman, I was always told to lose at sports so boys could feel good. And I was a really extraordinarily athlete, so I just said, that's not going to work out for me. I think that just observing society, and I say this, Will, because I grew up in the 1960s in the south part of Texas, and so I had a firsthand view from my parents and everybody around me about how we treat people differently, and I couldn't figure out why. Josh, to answer your question, basically, I think that I've just observed my life and observed other people, and I've observed what I heard in the church, and I always tried to make sense of it, and so much of it just didn't make sense to me. The black family was not welcome. Why? See, and I wanted to know why. Why wasn't the black person welcome? Why wasn't the woman welcome? Why was that I had to sit there and listen to a man be excommunicated from the Church of Christ because he got a divorce from his wife? I was a little incorrigible child, and I think that we all need to be incorrigible children if we're going to love Jesus the way that Jesus loves us. And that's tough. That's a tall order. And I think the first thing that Jesus wants us to do, and that's why it's called the conversation Jesus wants us to have, is to ask the hard questions, imagining that he's sitting right next to us. So there's no BS going in here. There's nobody interpreting for us what Scripture should be. It's just a conversation with the man himself.
Recently there was, when religion is in the news, it's either because they're trying to force it on you, or they want to, critique messages that don't comport with the way that they think about things. There was a bishop recently in DC, Bishop Marianne,
Yes.
and, kind of on the topic of, hey, the real conversation Jesus wants us to have, like if Jesus were listening to the conversations happening right now on both sides, like how do you think he would view it? As a person that knows Jesus, I'd love just to kind of get your thoughts.
I think that Jesus would have an open heart, and I think Jesus would listen to both sides. But I also believe very, very strongly, guys, for both of you, I believe this with all of my heart and soul, and Jesus would call BS on BS. He would. And I think that that's what happened, is that very loving and a gentle way it was said, this is what we know to be going on. This is not aligned with Christ. The message will never be received. I don't believe in that particular setting or through that particular heart, but I believe that everyone else was the actual listener of that. And so I believe that Jesus would say, we have to talk about the hard things, and we have to listen to one another. We have different ideas about how society is supposed to run, but they all should, in my humble viewpoint, align with what Jesus would do, and that's taking care of women, children, orphans, the marginalized, those in prison, looking at our system, our justice system, looking at why we still have misogyny. That's a big one for me. Looking at why we have sexual abuse and why that's okay. So I touch on these topics in the book. I am not saying that I know all of the answers, but what I do know with all of my heart is that Jesus was love. Jesus wants us to love our neighbor as ourselves, and unless we listen to the experiences of those people who are alike us and different from us, we cannot come to that love place. I do not know what it's like to be a black person. And for me, as a white person, to say that I do is I don't believe aligned with Jesus. But I want to hear your story, and I want you to inform me. I want to know your truth. Just like as a gay woman, you have no clue what it's like. You also, guys, don't know what it's like to be a woman. So I'll be happy to inform you, and you can tell me about your experience, and together we can come to a common ground. I think that's what love does. Yeah. I
do live with a woman. Does that give me like any credit?
It does, Will, it does. And I think that's fantastic. That's great. And still, you will never know what it's like, just like we will never know what it's like to be a guy. We just won't. We just won't.
You said something that I want to get back to, which I thought was a bit of a profound observation where, obviously we're talking about Trump and Bishop. Her message to Trump, I think you're right. I think he's got a pretty hard heart, not really going to find its way in there. I could be wrong. Jesus can do all kinds of things. You also mentioned that the message, though, is almost like how far that message has spread, seems like that's kind of the real story here, because, like in just a short amount of time, this bishop became viral. I think she was on The View or something like that, and it's just like only in the 21st century can a person of the cloth get a message out like that to so many people. I don't know. I don't know if you could just speak on that for a second.
Well, it's true, but if you think about it, with our well-connected world, any of us can get a message out, which what you're doing, I think what you two are doing is fantastic. It's great labor of love. It is. So I think that the audience, although we think that's for one or two or three, it's really for the world. And I think that her bravery was fantastic. And I think that we need to understand there are certain people in the world that have been so, how do I say this? I believe that when someone has been so badly abused that they often just pass that abuse on. And I want the world to quite understand that I have deep compassion for everyone who has been horribly abused. And I believe that family, there was a whole lot of abuse in it, as we see today in countless corners of the world. But that's not an excuse for putting that wounding on anyone. And that's one of the things that I think that this book can help, and that is that what is it that we're doing with our relationship to Jesus? And how are we walking in our faith so that we can stand up and stop the abuse with us, stop the self-abuse so that we don't abuse other people. That takes awareness, that takes great self-love, it takes great self-respect, and it takes doing the hard work. So she was courageous, she was brave, but we all need to have that bravery, even if it's in the privacy of our own home. Okay?
Yeah, I like that. That's really good. This question keeps kind of like circling in my mind, and because I completely agree that, you mentioned if you don't know someone's story, if you don't know what's going on in their life, if you don't even have any data at all to try to really understand who they are, then you're not going to be able to get to the threshold of being able to even start loving them, right? Because you don't know them. And you're going to make assumptions, right? About the way they live, what they think, how they feel, I remember the kind of assumptions that I would make when I was younger that I'd hear a lot in church when I grew up. And I had a pretty good church experience, to be honest with you. It wasn't terrible. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I didn't like for sure. And even getting older and reflecting back on it even more, right? Like, oh, that kind of was not what I wanted. But I didn't have some of the kinds of experiences some horrific experiences that some people had. And I never experienced sitting in church feeling like, oh man, I'm gay, or I'm a part of a group that is essentially preached against. Mm-hmm. And I can only imagine how painful that was. And I guess the question that comes to my mind is when we're entering into these conversations, say something about, homosexuality and the clobber passages or something like that, right? Assuming that we've gotten each other's stories, that we kind of understand something about that, about each other. Where is the balance in wanting to influence the other person and be influenced by them in terms of like trying to find like some acceptable answer that we feel like honors God, that we feel like honors the authority of Scripture, if that's important to us, right? Honors each other. How do we work through that in those conversations? Maybe when we have deep disagreements, because my guess is that you and I probably have deep disagreements about what the Bible says about marriage, or maybe we do, maybe we don't. I don't know. We haven't really talked about that. We certainly can. Not yet. We still got 45 minutes, right?
Excellent.
But it's not. My point is not to say, hey, I wanna have a big, in-depth debate about position A, position B in the Bible on marriage or homosexuality or misogyny or any of these things that we have mentioned so far, but more like where, in this particular question, where is that balance of, hey, I want Regina to influence me and I want to influence Regina. How do we get there? Does the question make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. And I because I was raised in the church in a fundamentalist kind of atmosphere, let's set aside the gay woman part, okay? Because I was indoctrinated, and I use that word, to believe probably exactly what you were indoctrinated to believe. Where I think we might find common ground and be able to discuss some of these topics with those people that we disagree with, or those people that think they want to point the finger of blame because I'm the other, is that we need to get on the same page about who wrote the Bible, what those verses mean to the ancient society that wrote them.
For sure.
What is the scholarship on that? What is the scientific evidence on that being biological today? And if we can take out of this conversation and find the love in order to actually look at what we consider to be somewhat evidence to a certain extent, how many times has the Bible been translated? Why do the four books of the Gospels contradict one another about Jesus? And if we start looking at these things, Josh, then, and that's what I did. And that's when I realized that Jesus is so much bigger than the Bible. He didn't write the Bible. He was a Jewish person. He went against his religious indoctrination, and he was the reason for Christianity. But the Bible was written, many, many years after Christ died. And I'll throw something else in here, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were not written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And that's just something that I did in my research, that I read, that they were written by other people, but that the authors of the Bible thought that they would hold more credibility if they labeled them such. So, true or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that it opens a question for the legitimacy of the entire work being the Word of God and the edict of God, okay? Because when you're gay and you're raised with those 7 clobber verses, and you find out, if you find out the historical facts around why those verses were in there, then it becomes, I need to look at everything that I was indoctrinated to believe through the sense of love, compassion, integrity, Jesus's heart. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I appreciate you doing that. Kind of like we spoke with Mark Charles a couple years ago. He's a Native American activist, wrote a really, really terrific book, and about manifest destiny, doctrine discovery stuff. Anyways, he was a Christian. And he mentioned that he was going to, I think the word he used was like interrogate his faith.
Oh, that's perfect. I love it.
Because
That's great.
because he was sort of like giving us kind of the history of why he believes what he believes. He's like, I believe because, you know, my parents and my parents were on a native reservation, or it was like, you know, some
Yep.
indoctrination kind of thing, you know, and it just long history of that in his lineage. And he's like, is that why I'm a Christian? And I love that too, because I'm like, we should all do that, you know, like we should, you know, find someone that knows a lot about the Bible, ask them really tough questions, and fact check everything they told us.
Well, if I could interject here, I
Mhm.
think that we need to go beyond the Bible, okay? Because if you continue to do the same thing over and over, see, then we're going to validate everything we believe through this one particular thing. If you open yourself up, and this is what I try to get us to do in this particular book, and that is open ourselves up to the bigger picture. What did Jesus stand for? What is it that we really know about him? Because there's so much that we don't know. But what do we really know? Love your neighbor as yourself. What if we just boil it down to that? What if we just define what that means? That means Josh and I have a very wonderful, respectful conversation. He now has a very good gay friend, and I have a Republican friend. See, so we have that kind
Everyone
of,
wins.
everybody wins. And that's exactly what I think Jesus would want us to do, is try to create win-win. The problem comes when we are supporting abuse of the other, because we have to remember Christ was scapegoated. Christ died as a scapegoat. And so we're still in this organized religion way of thinking, pointing the finger of blame at somebody. It's my fault. It's women's fault. We don't make good decisions over our own body, blah, blah, blah. Whatever it is, there seems to be some excuse. And these things are created. I mean, we've got Christian nationalism today. We also have the new apostolic reformation. We have all of these things that are very interesting, but I don't believe in my research anywhere close to align with Christ. It's God, but what is God? Who are we to say who God is? I mean, I'm serious. We're told who God is in the Bible. But if you look at all faiths in the world, every single one of them has do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And that's the foundation of every single major world religion. And so something, whatever that creative force is, gave the same message to everybody. And we have twisted that to form whatever it is that we want it to be. So for me, Will, I would put the Bible aside and I would have Jesus next to us instead. Okay?
Yeah, I think that's a good plan. We should all just do that.
Well, and it's hard to do because when you're indoctrinated into a child in India is Hindu, a child in another country is indoctrinated into their religion, and so you've been given this set of rules and regulations, and if you go against those, then you're sinning and you're committing blasphemy and all of these other things. Why does that make you want to question even more? Because someone's trying to control a message. I want to tell you this, guys. I believe this is correct, that until the 1500s, it was illegal to have your own copy of the Bible. You were punished by death if you had it. What does that tell you? Somebody else wants you to know exactly what you're supposed to believe. And so when you grow up gay, you're thinking, wow, this is a lot of stuff, you know? We need to look at all of this stuff. Why don't we boil it down? And that's what I've tried to do in this book, is just get us to ask questions about our faith, what we believe God is.
I was going to say, so in Anthea Butler's book, we were fortunate enough to have her on the show. She wrote a book called White Evangelical Racism, I think. Oh man, I'm drawing a blank. But anyways, in the book, she talks about the Negro Bible, which was a Bible that was given to some slaves that had passages omitted. So then you have to ask yourself, like, why would they have to omit those passages? Like, what about those, you know, what about that part of the Bible makes it so dangerous? But I want to ask you though, just a question about, you know, fellowshipping with Jesus, you know, setting the Bible aside and just focusing on Jesus. How do you know you've got the right Jesus? Because I think that there are some folks, you know, kind of in the public space that feel like their version of Jesus is more correct than my version of Jesus, and I feel the exact opposite. You know, I feel like my version of Jesus is the most correct version. So how do you know you got the right one and not some ripoff?
Love your neighbor as yourself. We don't need to be armed with AK-47s. We don't have to have someone who proclaims to be Christ, someone who walks in the footsteps of Christ, okay? That means a person of integrity, person who respects women, person who's honest, person who could admit their mistakes. I mean, it's pretty easy for me to differentiate what that means. Also, going back to your other thing that you talked about, the Bible that's used in African countries among the Christians there has a lot more books to it, okay, than the Bibles that are used over here. There are certain books of the Bible that have been left out. The Apocrypha, very interesting to go into that. So that's another thing that we need to talk about if we want to put the Bible aside, because there's so much that has been intentionally left out. So that's how I would differentiate that, okay? Jesus stood up for women. We can look at the woman at the well. We can look at Mary Magdalene. We can look at that. So I don't believe that you can create your own version of Jesus. If you do, then that needs to be aligned with the highest integrity that we can think of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. I mean, what I hear you saying is that there's this broad spectrum of views in the world, number one. There's several different sacred texts. So the first question is, how do we differentiate between one and the other? And how do we determine authority, if there is authority, and where does it lie? And then this sense of like, and the almost universal ignorance in many ways of how the Bible itself was produced. The historical process that went into it. And I think for some that can be, I think for everyone, it's an important thing to understand, because I think it is just part of reality. So wherever you fall on that, whether you fall on, I understand the historical process, and I think that the Bible we have as Protestants is the one that we're supposed to have with the 66 books, and I understand that, and and I have my reasons, and now I'm moving on. Or if it's I need that plus the Apocrypha, then plus other books. Go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
No, I loved it, because I'm thinking, why are we making it so hard?
Yeah.
Why are we making it so difficult? And I don't mean you and me, sweetie. I'm talking about why has it always been so difficult? Because from the very beginning, people took the preachings of Jesus and they turned them for their own advantage. And we see that today, and that's where I think that we need to have a spiritual revolution and evolution in Christianity. That's the whole reason I wrote the book. I love Jesus very much. I love God now that I understand my concept of God that I gained through discussions with an atheist. So how's that, Joss, for having fun? He's my best friend. It's great. And I just love him to death. And he is one of the most special men that I've ever met. He's 6 foot something, and he's got this little teeny tiny wife, and he's wonderful. He's very courteous. He loves women. He does not believe in God. He's supportive of me. He's just fantastic. He's what I think all men should be. That's just I'm spoiled. There you have it. But it was through conversation with him, Josh, that I developed this deep understanding of what God is to me, and that is an original creative source. And human beings have tried to put it into form, and they have worshiped that form. And I think that we need to be living the message that makes it very easy. Treat your neighbor as you want to be treated. Love your neighbor as you want to be loved. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But here's the secret, guys, if you want to know, and another reason that I spent so much time putting my heart on paper is that we have to love ourselves first before we can even begin to love anybody else. I was told that was selfish. I had to love Jesus and God, and one day I woke up and I went, how? How do I love something that I cannot touch and see and feel if I don't love the thing that I can? And so my life, my first book, Lead With Your Heart, was about my journey of learning to love myself. Because only when I do that am I able to express love for you, Josh, express for you, Will, and be able to hold space for you to believe what you want to believe and try to help us come to common ground about what it means to actually be love in action, which is what Jesus was. It's pretty simple, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we definitely overcomplicate everything. And, I always feel a tension inside when I talk about the Bible, because I really love the Bible, but my views of the Bible have certainly shifted, although I would still probably consider myself, and probably would be considered, by anyone really hearing me, to be pretty conservative in it and pretty, still believing in the authority and inerrancy, nuanced, I would have to add, because I do think that that is a very much a misunderstood concept, even if I don't even know if I totally understand it. And, but I always feel this tension because it's like I'm trying to figure out, okay, God, I want to be able to live the life that you've asked me to live. And I also, as a pastor and teacher, someone who feels called into this, I want to be able to teach in a way that is respectful, but in a way that also isn't just respectful and setting aside any elements of challenge, any elements of, hey, you need to change, this part of you needs to be brought in submission, whatever it is. And there's a lot of different ways in which we're challenged by it. I'm constantly challenged in my life by the teachings of Jesus and all of that. And one thing that I'd love for you to talk about is this idea of these conflicts with Jesus' ideal that you see in the institutional Christianity of today. And I would love for you to you've mentioned them, but even if in this question as just, systematically as you can, what are those conflicts with what Jesus taught, with what he showed us? And yeah, just kind of describe that divergence. I would love to hear that.
Well, I've written a book on it, for sure. And in a nutshell, we are a misogynistic society. Why is that? Control. We want to control women's bodies. Why is that? Control. Why are we focused on prosperity gospel when we have people that are homeless? Why is it that we are trying to dominate the planet when we are to be good stewards of the earth? So there's so much that I address in this particular book. And again, I haven't written a 3,000 page book. It's very short. It's 200 pages, a few more words than that, but 200 pages. But I talk about these things, and why isn't it that we haven't addressed misogyny? What is about that? What is the fear of letting women who Jesus loved be an equal partner in society, and an equal partner in decision making, and an equal partner in government? I talk about politics. I talk about the institutionalized religion that has taken over our political system, and that's not how it's supposed to be in our democracy. And what is the motivation for that, Josh? See, we have to go back and we have to look at the motivation. And I think that helps me tremendously separate what Jesus would do from what ego would do. Okay? For me, the 40 days in the desert when Jesus was over there wrestling with whatever is called Satan, but that was an egocentric desire to rule, an egocentric desire to be in charge, to be special, to be whatever, and overcame that. Isn't that our goal too, to overcome that, so that we can actually walk in his footsteps? We are not born sinners, Josh. We develop that skill on our own, okay? And we really do. I believe that. Because as a little teeny child, as 4 years old, sitting in church, I was not a sinner. But I was already told that. So if you're programmed into believing that, look at all of the emotional wounding that it's doing. I talk about that also. I talk about how we have to love ourselves first in order to love Jesus, love God, love our neighbor. Because how do we express love for God? By loving our neighbor. It doesn't mean that we agree with our neighbor at 2 o'clock in the morning when he's going on a binger, and he's shooting off his gun or doing whatever. It means that we need to do something in order to protect ourselves from those people that push their rights too far. Because if I'm the only person that is suffering, then there's something wrong. You see what I mean? If many of us are suffering, then there's really something wrong with our society and what we are taught to believe. Politics is not a spectator sport. Jesus was very into standing up for what was right. He bucked against authority. But today we are not informed at the same level. That's why what y'all are doing is so very important, because we can have whoever say whatever and make whatever up that they want to, and all of a sudden Duck Dynasty is Christ. And people believe that, or people believe they go to Flashpoint, and they believe all of these so-called prophets in this NAR movement that I mentioned just a little while ago. Well, I think God speaks to us in real time, but I also believe that God is aligned with love. So if you're going to want to domineer somebody or blame somebody for all of your problems, then I think there's a problem with that. Does that make sense? That's basically the book in a nutshell. We could go on and on and on and on. I suggest people get it because it really does. I've done the hard work for you, Josh. I've asked all of the hard questions that we need to in our modern day society. What is free speech? Does that mean that you can ruin my reputation based on absolutely nothing? No, that's not what that means. We need to get on the same page about what the Constitution actually says about what it means, the First Amendment and the Second Amendment.
Free speech doesn't mean free of consequences.
Well, apparently it does, though, doesn't it? Okay? And so that's where people push it too far. So I ask us to ask these questions because the whole point of this, guys, is to walk in the footsteps of Jesus the best that we possibly can. We're never going to be perfect, but we can get very proficient at it. But we have to constantly self-assess. Was I mad at that driver because they cut me off? Why? Maybe that driver has to go to the hospital. His wife is having a baby. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, what I would tell that driver is just have the baby at home like we did. So much cheaper. So much cheaper.
Yes.
Understand? Well, if you can stop him down the road and tell him to, and great. That'll be one of your wonderful, bonding conversations that Josh was talking about.
Yeah, so I'm curious, for a person that really wants to know the heart of Jesus,
mm-hmm.
Would you just say the four Gospels where, the red letter type of Jesus' writings is the only place that we can learn about him, or is there another place? I know you mentioned some potential issues you had with the way the Bible was written and who was written by and so on and so forth. But I'm curious, is there a different way to know Jesus than just the Gospels?
Sure, absolutely. I think that when you have conversation with someone that's heartfelt, that's Jesus is in the room. I think that when we love our neighbor as ourselves, Jesus is in the room. I do. I want to tell you a story, guys. I go to this restaurant over here. I haven't lived where I live now for very long. And I go to the restaurant and I get some food. I never stay. I never really dine in. Every single time I walk in there, everybody wants to hug me. Why? Because I'm older? Okay, that's sweet. That's really nice. But I don't think that's it. I think it's because I walk in and I treat everybody the way that I want to be treated. I'm not perfect. Oh my goodness, I'm not perfect. Please understand that. But I really, truly try to live that way because I think we can make it that simple. I really do. I think there's so many things about Jesus that we will never, ever know. I think so. And I think we've been told who he is. So I believe reading the red letter are fine. That's great. But understand that if you take the very best of this beautiful work, Josh, the very best of it, and just cut away all of the other stuff, and understand that Jesus is the reason for Christianity, if we take Jesus out of Christianity, then I think he's going to want his name removed from it. And so if you really do, if you take one book of science, and you put it over here, and it was written in the 1800s, and you want us to go by that today, then I think that we have a problem. And that's what I'm saying with deep respect and understanding that we need to up our game here a little bit, kids. We need to up it. We need to come fast forward 2,000 and something years to the present. Take what was written and build upon the very best parts. But don't let that be the only influence. And don't let that be the person who's standing up there telling you their interpretation of something. You need to get in, you need to research, you need to dive in, and you need to be a participant in your own faith journey.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and I love for you to give me some advice on something that I contend with, that I'm sure that a lot of folks listening or watching this also probably contend with. You are going to the Bible, you're praying to try to figure out a particular situation or decision. You feel like God telling you, yeah, you should do X. And you're like, I don't want to do X. And he's like, but you got to do X. And I'm like,
she's like, We just hit on that again too, didn't we? Wow. Okay. The root of misogyny. Let's label God male.
Did I use
Yes, you
the male?
did, sweetheart.
See, it just happens naturally.
Yeah.
But how do you? Okay, so I'll just use that example. Let's just say I am a misogynist. I'm not, but let's just say and I'm like, I want to keep using, the male pronouns because, like, God the Father, and I pray, and then through my praying and reading, I'm like, you know what, that Regina is probably right, but I'm not going to do that, or I don't want to do that. So how do you overcome, like that hesitancy to do what God wants you to do when you don't really want to do it?
Well, I think that that's the human ego and the human will, and if you believe that God gave you free will, then you're able to do whatever it is you want. But here's the rub. Will you actually have the relationship to the divine? See, we can just call God God. We don't have to call him him. We don't have to do whatever. We can get into that Henry VIII wanted, the Lord's Prayer written for him, and so, we've got all of that translation and stuff. But what if we just called God God? How far would that go? Well, let's just start there. How far would that go to ending misogyny within the Christian church and within the Christian religion? It's just a thought, and why would anyone be opposed to that? Then we have to investigate, okay, why there would be an opposition to that, because we've been told God is male. God talks to us all the time. It is quiet, peaceful. We know exactly what we need to do, Will, and I want to tell you what I find, and it's not for everybody, but I think maybe it will be. It's the connection to soul when we do what we know we need to do, and we overrule the justifications and the fear of our egocentric mind. I talk about that in the book, too. That had to happen for me, kids. This was not just like I came out of the womb and, wow, okay, great, I have no ego. No. I had a bunch of stuff going on, and I had to actually think about it. How does it feel to be egocentric, and how does it feel to be loving? And I choose loving. Will, every single day you have thousands and thousands of thoughts, and each one of those, if you're aware of each one of those, that's great, but you can make those decisions based upon what you know in your heart. Now, you might be lazy and not do it, but then there's going to be a consequence for that. And see if we can plug in that truth, that there's a consequence for everything that we do. It might not show up in a horrible way, but it might be something so small that we say, man, I wish I would have done that. And if we learn from that, then our faith journey is strengthened, I believe. At least mine has been. You read in the book about the sweat lodge, the Native American Lakota ceremony that I underwent. You talk about an amazing adventure of letting go of ego, to know that our body is very strong, but our soul, that connecting to the divine, it's so much stronger. It really is. So that's my advice, Will. Follow the direction. It's peaceful. It feels like a mom and dad hugging you, saying, son, you got to do it. I'm sorry. It's going to be tough, but you got to do it.
I mean, they're just so... The reason I love this conversation is, one, I really like talking to someone who feels very confident and has done the work and has done
doing
the
the work,
research.
Josh. Doing the work.
Doing
Who's
the
finished?
work. There
Who's
you go.
finished? I'm not
Who
finished.
is doing the work? There you
Let's
go.
be
And
very
committed to doing the work. Yeah.
That's it. Okay.
And
doing the work.
I do feel like, for all the differences in belief that probably you and I have, there are probably many, many that we do have the same. And just, I feel that kind of kindred spirit in the sense of, I want to continue doing the work. I want to continue doing the work. I want to continue to allow other people to influence me. I want to continue to engage with topics and ideas and concepts that maybe I'm not comfortable with, that I disagree with, and that really challenge me. But I do have to say, it is very uncomfortable, and that there's a cognitive dissonance that starts to come in.
Yes, that's in the book
very,
too.
very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. And I would love to hear some of your thoughts and advice from the book and from beyond. Well, what do you do with the cognitive dissonance? I mean, we have this desire to resolve it, right? We have this deep need to either resolve it or move on. No, I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm saying it seems to me there's this deep need to either I got to get this resolved, and if I can't get it resolved, I'm either going to stop thinking about it, move on from it, or I'm going to find an answer that's good enough, move on, and try, because I can't continue to live in the cognitive dissonance. How have you handled that? And what would you suggest for people that experience that? How do you keep doing the work when it's so uncomfortable?
I don't think it's uncomfortable, Josh. That, there's a whole thing about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. Why are we uncomfortable? Is it fear? Is it fear of the unknown? Is it because we want to control this? What is it? See, that's the interesting part for me, because there is no fear on my faith journey. I'm not going to hell. I promise. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. Okay. Why? Because I've already been there. I have lived hell on earth, and I still do, because so many people point their finger at me. I'm the problem. I need to be taken care of when I compose less than 5% of the population. Okay? I mean, come on. So I have already been there, so I'm not scared of hell. I also believe that we create heaven here. If I'm blessed to go to some place that's better, that's fantastic, but I need to deserve it. And not just go sit in church and say, oh, well, I'm going to go to heaven because I was baptized twice, by the way, just to make sure. All right, so I've got a twofer, okay? But, I don't believe it's hard. Everything's hard when we tell ourselves that it's hard. Losing weight is hard. Being polite to rude people is hard. Everything is hard when we tell ourselves that it is. What if we start telling ourselves that finding solutions to these things is really very easy if we stop trying to control everything? You see what I mean? It's a beautiful journey, but it's one-on-one, Josh. And it's overcoming fear to allow the love to come in. It doesn't mean that I'm not scared of an earthquake or of a fire when I lived in Los Angeles. It's not, I don't live in fear of those things, but I have a healthy fear when they happen. I'm not afraid of anything. Why would I be afraid? Jesus wasn't afraid. He wasn't excited to die. I can guarantee you, and he suffered like we can't even begin to imagine. But did he suffer more on the cross, or did he suffer because people betrayed him, Josh? Did they twist his message for their own use? Is he suffering now because of that? See, those are the things that they don't keep me awake at night, but I'm not scared to find the answers to those. And I think it all goes back to love, but we have to know what love is. We really do. I don't think it's hard. I don't. I think it's a beautiful journey of self-discovery, of how we are more similar than different, how we do have the exact same goal, and that is to live aligned with whatever that power is that is so magnificently beautiful. Look, we're surrounded by it. We've been so blessed, and yet we just complain all the time, and we shouldn't. We are so blessed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That. It is hard for me, but I really appreciate what you're saying.
Josh,
I'm like, okay, how do I
It's okay.
metabolize some of this?
Well, it's about control. It really is. And whenever you've got my number, just call me. We'll have our own private conversation. It's great. I'll be happy to, because there's no reason
I'd be
to
happy
fear.
to as well.
It is, it is not about that. We have so much division, and we have so much division with other people because we have so much division within our own self. We're not supposed to have all of this angst about this stuff, guys. It's supposed to be easier, so that we can find the answers to the solutions that we face together as a human species. And Will, I'm going to go to this. There is no such thing as race. There is the human race, and every time I have to fill out a form, I put that down, because the biology of race, I forgot the guy's name, it's in my book, but there's black skin, brown skin, all sorts of different skin, but our skin color is the reason that we either are protected from the sun or we are not, okay? But it is not a racial classification. What if we go to the historical evidence that Jesus came from a country where the skin is dark? How would that change the relationships that we have with our black and brown brothers and sisters? Wow, I talk about that in the book too. So this is real. It's like going to be so much fun for so many people, Josh. And I want it to be fun because it's not supposed to be confrontational. That's why you take it in the privacy of your own home or in your study group or your Bible group, and you ask these questions of one another, and it's not to beat each other up. It's to say, well, that's interesting. I never thought about that before. And we could get into something else, but I'm going to be polite, okay? So we're not going to do that.
So I don't know, like there's a lot of disaffected Christians out there that are going through all the things, ex-evangelicals, deconstruction, I mean, if you read any sort of, like, PRI came out with a survey, basically saying that, like, there's been a pretty precipitous decline in church, basically the same thing today, right? In church attendance, over the past years. So
why is that?
Yeah. Oh wait, Regina.
Sorry, my hand is up. Oh, yes. Oh, thank you so much. I do. Well, I have something that's good for me, and that is where you go into an environment and you find out how crappy you are all the time, and that you're supposed to hate this person, and this person. Why? What's the attraction? Okay? People want to feel that they're part of something, guys. They do. But people really resonate on love. But our society is not love-based right now, okay? We've got to tear down whoever is the pop star of the week or whatever. What the? People are going to have things to say about me. I don't care. Sorry, I don't. Forgive me for not caring. But I don't, because it's not productive to anything. It's not productive to politics. It's not productive to our society. We are not going to make it if we don't learn that this is not the way to go. Tearing someone else down, and that's what happens from the pulpit in so many churches, especially around the area where I've just moved, okay? It just happens. They're telling you who to vote for. They're telling you why women can't have rights. If you're always being told how crappy you are, then why do you think that there's an obesity epidemic? Why do you think there's a drug addiction epidemic? Why do you think, and I'm not saying that all of this is a result of religion, but I'm telling you that it's feeling disenfranchised from society. And if you've got a lot of people that are going to a church that tells you to believe a way, then it's going to spill over into their social life. It's going to spill into every single part of their being. That's why we've got to love ourselves. We do. We just have to start with ourselves first. And we can't have this division anymore. I don't care if you like cheeseburgers. I'm not going to eat one. But it's okay if you do.
Yeah, it's
good, because I really like cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
Excellent, Josh. We'll talk about your health and, the stewardship of the planet on our next time we talk, okay? But it's up to you, because you have to make those decisions for yourself. But you can't tell me that I have to. You see what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
All right, that's respect. Okay.
It's interesting what you just said, because my wife and I had a conversation recently. It's like, we're in Virginia. It's been snowing a lot lately, and our kids are just starting to learn to walk to the bus by themselves. And I did the whole, like, when I was your age, like, and then my wife, very wisely, because she's the wise one, said, yeah, you really shouldn't do that, because it kind of reinforces that their opinions aren't that valid, and what you just said made a lot of sense, where it's like, you've already got a person walking into an environment where they're like, is this one of those churches, and then, like, will they love me for who I am? And then the pastor gets up there and gives a message saying, no, I don't love you for who you are, and then you're just like, okay, I gave the church thing a try.
Well, I think that we're such a beautiful time in our human history, don't you think? I mean, I think it's just really wonderful, because we get an opportunity to look at all of the systems that human civilization has depended on for so long. War as a business, prisons as a business, economic inequality as a business and a way of dealing with people. I mean, we get to look at so much, and it can be overwhelming. But if we just take the thing that we can have influence on, and it's that our behavior, our attitudes, what questions do we need to ask ourselves about our relationships, about what we're modeling for our children, why we don't have sensible gun laws, why we allow just things about our society as something that is safe. My father's 101 years old. I was adopted, and he is still alive. My adopted dad is still alive. My mother passed away in August, but my dad's he was a member of the NRA. He was. But he also believes in safety for everybody. Why can't we have that kind of conversation? Why does it have to be this or that? Why can't we come to the middle ground? I think that takes a willingness to be flexible. I think, Josh, it requires letting go of fear of control. I think it requires a lot of, I'm going to say it, surrender and vulnerability. And I think that as a woman, maybe that's easier for me. Yes, surrender. Isn't that wonderful for our faith? Surrender. It is. Surrender to something that's greater than ourselves. And we can feel it when it's okay. We can feel it when it's right. We can also feel it when it feels self-centered, controlling, demanding, whatever. So that's what I think about that, Will. I think that you're doing a great job, but I don't know how you can be a parent. I have no idea today. I really don't. I really don't.
Neither do I. You and I are in good company, because like it's like,
yeah,
I could go on a tangent about this too, about like they don't teach you any of this stuff in school or anything, and then they expect you to like raise another human being. It's just like,
that's
just do whatever. I mean, my wife fortunately went to school to learn like early childhood behavior, so like she is the resident expert, but that's probably not your typical household.
Well, and I think that part of that, and I think you've brought up something that's very, very important. Well, you really have, because isn't parenting a child the most important responsibility that you can have? I believe it is. I think it's a blessing. I think it's a gift. And so you can't just throw it out into the world to survive in social media and everything that it's influenced by. You've got to be able to give it guidelines, and still there's going to have all sorts of junk that comes in. But if they have that foundation of love and respect and understanding, certainly in the first 5 to 7 years, I think you will have done a really great job. I do. I think that's very important.
I need that kind of affirmation in my life. So thank you for saying that. I don't know if I'm actually even a good adult, because I still don't know what a 401k is. So, pray for me. But Regina, how can people get a hold of your book, follow what you're doing, like give us all the socials and all the places you want them to buy your book at?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Regina V. Cates. I'm on Instagram, Regina V. Cates, and that's spelled Cates. My book is The Real Conversation Jesus Wants Us to Have, A Call to Bravery, Peace, and Love. It will be available March 4th. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere that you get books. My website is Regina V. Cates. I plan on sticking around for a long time. Thank you, whatever that time is, to facilitate these conversations in a safe environment. I'm not trying to make people wrong. I'm trying to ask the questions that we might come together and saying, well, that was weird. Okay. Yeah.
Well,
that's it.
Thank you so much for coming by. This was a pleasure speaking with you. This was a lot of fun, and hopefully maybe we can do it again sometime. So thank you for joining us, and thank you to our audience for stopping by and hanging out with us. And remember, as always, keep your conversations not right or left, but up, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, guys.